Thank you very much, Dr. Jibril, for this very clear message and clear vision. You told me before we came in that you didn't want to talk too long in order to hear also the opinion from the public and questions from the public. So you want to take some space for it. So please feel free to ask questions, also to give an opinion if you like. Just don't talk longer than 5 minutes, please.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your insightful intervention. I'm Kadir Bora. I'm working for European Parliament as a trainee. So when you are projecting an image of Europe, I would love to add some more things to your projection. So today we are talking about this Europe. I will be a little bit pessimist, saying that Europe is shrinking, as you said, demographically, especially in Germany and the eastern states. Demographically, and if I may say, is collapsing. And secondly, today we are just in France talking about 11% of young unemployment, Mr. Prime Minister. Today, like just in the European Union, labor mobility is 4.3%, which is really low in compared to the United States, which is 35%. Basically, it's saying that the labor is not moving in the European Union. And lastly, we are seeing the AfD, Alternative for Deutschland in Germany, Front National in France, the rise of the populist parties opposing mainly the migration coming from Africa and the Middle East. And lastly, we have some leaders like Viktor Orban, who is talking about clash of civilization and saying that only Christian identity can entre guillemets can fight against that Islamist migration, if I may say. Obviously, it's not my opinion. So, Mr. Mahmoud Jibril, what would you do if you were a European leader in order to combat against that image of Europe?
Let me look at Europe from a different perspective. Africa, as I said, by the year 2000 will be exceeding 2 billion people. Africa, if I want to look at it from a European national interest, can be an opportunity, because I would look at it as the most expanding market in the globe for European goods, for European products. The question, how can I make strategic alliances inside that continent? The Chinese today are far ahead of everybody in Africa. Libya is investing no less than 43 African countries. If I bring state back to Libya as a European Union, and go for this formula that I talked about, marriage of convenience between capital and technology, Libya can be the spearhead for Europe economically in each African capital. Why don't we, in the short run, think of having African Development Fund financed by European companies, just 1% of the profit of the European companies? This will create a huge amount of money. European budgets, official budgets from the government, we don't want to touch their money. This is taxpayer money. But the private sector in each single European country can contribute to this fund. In addition to the money allocated by Libyans, and start this very ambitious project, Europe can be the leading economic force in Africa. If you look at China, in terms of a proximity to Africa, there is a huge difference between Europe and China. Italy, just 220 kilometers from Libya. So there is an opportunity. But we started looking at the empty side of those Africans coming. They are a threat to our demographic structure. They are a threat to our security. They are a threat to... But we never even consider thinking at this part and how we can enlarge that part. Africa can be the land of opportunity for Europe if we think from a completely different perspective. Therefore, promoting the future of Europe can take a completely different track from the track that we are moving in right now. I don't know whether that answered your question or not.
Yes, my name is Liam Kun Lim. I used to be an official of the European Commission, DG Home. Mr. Jibril, thank you very much for your lecture. It's very eye-opening. You rightly stressed the importance of bringing back a kind of a government structure in Libya, which is indeed currently is missing. Now, my question is, if the Libyan is not able to bring that structure, how can the European help? Because isn't one of the main problems in creating a solid, stable government structure in Libya is the tribe structure in Libya, which is not accepting each other? So in which direction are we looking at? Even if you cannot bring that back yourself, how can the European help on that one? Are we looking towards something like a federal structures, or what are your vision on that?
Okay, some follow-up question, yes, sir.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, I have a linked question, if you don't mind. My name is Kirsten. I work as a policy analyst at the European Parliament. So mine's very linked to that. Is you talk about sort of helping give Libya back its state and the EU doing that. How do you envisage that happening? Because that's kind of the million-dollar question at the moment, is how do we get past the Libyan political agreement, or how do we get that implemented? And linked to that is, you talked about the difference or the separation of authority and power. And I have kind of two elements to that, is how do you propose reintegrating those so that authority and power rest in the same hands? And you mentioned the idea of joint border forces, and you mentioned Libyan army in that context. You also mentioned the Tuareg. But within that context, who is the Libyan army in that picture? Thank you.
Well, I think the two questions are related to each other, you know. I don't know whether the Libyans had a chance to talk to each other or not, you know, because I think they didn't have much of a chance so far, you know. Unfortunately, what's taking place in Libya is a proxy war, you know. And European differences and Arab differences are settled in Libyan soil, you know. The problem with that is that it created a state of dependency on the part of Libyans on foreigners, you know. And let me be very frank, unfortunately, because of lack of mutual trust between us as Libyans, we became more dependent on foreigners than depending on our own selves. We Libyans, we don't listen to each other, but we hear about each other from others, you know, and that's really bad here. Maybe, just for the sake of change, if we say hands off, let Libyans try. This in terms of the how. In terms of what, we should not discuss forming another government. We had enough governments in the last 7 years, you know. We should discuss how we can bring effectiveness to the government that can govern. That's the issue of combining authority and power. By discussing those problems that impede bringing the state back to our lives. First, arms collection, militia deconstruction and reintegration in different options. With their participation, not we do it and ask them to implement it. No, we discuss it with them. Because militia leaders today, as I said, They are the real power. It's not in their vested interest to bring the state back, because they might be taken to jail. They might be handed to another government for trial. They might be handed to another international court for trial. Any new government might ask them, from where you got this money? Millions, hundreds of millions, you know. So it's not in their vested interest. The plan is to make the state more in their interest than the current situation. So they became stakeholders, and they're going to defend and contribute in rebuilding the state because they have interests in rebuilding the state. How the army should be rebuilt in Libya, how the police can be back into the street, how the judiciary system can be reactivated, how the national reconciliation can be implemented, can be achieved, and how the economy, the most important thing in Libya, can be reactivated. We have more than 28 Libyan towns and cities which are totally free of arms and militias. Why don't we start rebuilding the state from the periphery instead of building it from the center? So these are the ideas of the what should be discussed. After we agree on this program of rebuilding the state, only at that point we talk about forming the government. But all the journey of Skhirat and before that is always focusing on what's the formation of the government should look like, who's going to be in that government. But we never asked ourselves to do what? To do what? In our case, the what is needed. Then who should implement that what becomes irrelevant. As long as I take part in the solution, I'm not going to fight over who's going to be the prime minister because I know that he's going to implement what I want. He's not going to work against my own interest. But unfortunately, one UN envoy after another, before Mr. Bernardino, we had two governments. And I remember advising him in Malta, please, Bernardino, the issue in Libya is not power sharing, as you say, because we don't have a power to be shared. We have to establish state power first, and then we talk about sharing it. Your mission and our mission is to create this power for the state, bring the state back. And then we talk about who's going to be in the government. Unfortunately, he said, no, this is a political struggle, political conflict, and it's over that pie. Let us enlarge the pie. Everybody will take his share. I said, there is no pie. First of all, it's not a political conflict. It's a conflict over financial resources. Because Libya is the only country where the uprisings took place in those 5 countries. It's the only country which is an oil-producing country. It's different from Egypt, from Tunisia, from Yemen, from Syria. And this is a problem for even the international donors. Because whenever post-conflict for international donors, they start dictating their policies and how they donate. For Libya, it's a problem. They have frozen its assets. And they cannot dictate anything. And that's why the amount and the depth and the size of corruption that takes place in Libya today is unprecedented in the history of the region. Simply because we don't have those power institutions that can monitor, can take to court, and can take to jail. We don't have it. Most of the prisons are under militia. So, unfortunately, we wasted 7 years now by going in the wrong direction. And unfortunately, the whole international community and the United Nations, the European Union, the African Union, the Arab League, everybody is supporting Skhirat. Not only this, the European Union sanctioned 3 Libyan figures because they spoke against Skhirat. And then when Mr. Salama came after Bernardino, he said, hey, there are serious problems with the Skhirat. That's why we want to modify it. So those 3 were right when they spoke against Khirat. Why don't we take them off the sanction? No, they are still sanctioned. What's Khirat? Khirat is about developing a governance structure for a state that doesn't exist. That's the irony. We are developing a governance structure, HOR, State Council, government, National Security Council, but where is the state? It's not there. So unfortunately, it's like somebody who's riding a car and taking everybody on board, and after 7, he discovered that, well, this is not the right destination. Well, 7 years, we lost lots of blood and lots of money, and most importantly, lots of Libya's future, you know.
Dr. Jibril, thank you for coming and talking to us. And I have a couple of comments or questions, and I will, in a way, not be politically correct, but the opinion that I'm going to voice is what I have also heard from people coming, refugees from Libya included, and other countries. And I'm used to not being politically correct coming from an ex-communist country. So in a way, what is it feasible? You said about the statehood building in Libya and having a state, and I can't agree more. But from what we have observed over the years, there was a state in Libya, there was a state in Iraq, there was a state in Syria. I mean, I don't need to go on. And they were strong states, and they were secular, and they were dictatorships. But they worked for quite a big portion of the population. And many of my countrymen who have worked in Libya were saying that the Libyans were pretty well off and pretty happy with the former regime, with the regime of Gaddafi. And in a way, when I think of the region, I feel a huge frustration, because for me, the alternative is dictatorship or chaos. And if you ask me, I would opt for dictatorship. And so, I mean, yeah, is there another option between dictatorship and chaos? This is one question. And then I have two comments. One is about the crowds of Africans that Europe wants pushed back, that they may come back as terrorists the second time around. And it sounds to me a pretty childish logic, although you're probably right. But it's like a child saying, okay, if you don't buy me that chocolate, I'm going to come back and break the TV set. So in a way, should Europe succumb to this kind of, in a way, blackmailing? I mean, if you don't agree to what I want, I'll come and kill you. This is, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not talking in a scholarly way, but this is the way I got it. And then the other thing, it's a great idea to retrain and because Europe will need, demography, yes, I agree, is the name of the game. Europe will need badly young people working. But then you have a huge competition from China, because Chinese who are ready to work 15 hours a day, 6 days a week. I mean, if I was a European leader, I would import or let Chinese in to fill in that gap. And I'm not saying that in a critical way, but in a way, I would rather have the African work ethic, not being driven to work like crazy.
Let us start by the question of dictatorship vis-à-vis chaos. First of all, I don't think I can compare a regime with non-regime. I mean, I can compare the two when there are two regimes. What took place in Libya 17th of February was spontaneous uprising. It was not a plan executed by some people that they have a project, they have leadership, they have organization, so we can hold them accountable for that plan. That was a rejection of what was going on, but without any futuristic alternative that we want this. Libyans, because of those 42 years of deprivation of development, they revolted against the regime because they were looking for a better life, not because they had a vision of this better life and they failed to execute it. It was just spontaneous. It's like a volcano. It's like a volcano. When it erupts, it will continue sending those lava for quite some time. And we are in the lava years, okay? But believe me, the lava which came after the coup, it's the most fertile soil for plantation. I'm not saying that, no, it's just a proverb. I didn't mean it that what's coming is going to be better. As long as the Libyans don't agree on a common vision of what they want for themselves, then the state of anarchy and chaos might continue. To compare it with the past, no. During Gaddafi, there was a regime. It has its own version of the economy, has its version of politics, has its version of the social life. So I can judge that regime, whether it has delivered to the people or not. 42 years, when that uprising took place, unemployment rate in Libya was 33%. I was the Minister of Planning, and I know what I'm talking about. 33% in a country, just 6 million people with vast oil revenues. Isn't that strange, Now those oil revenues are robbed all over the place, So it's not a comparison with chaos dictatorship. People will strive all throughout history for a better life. Whenever there is a deprivation, people revolt. People reject that. Today is not a better way of life, what's taking place in Libya today. Not because of the regime, because of the lack of a regime. We hope that one day we manage as Libyans to reach an agreement to build a new regime. At that point, we can judge it and compare it with Gaddafi years. For me, the uprising ended 23rd of October 2011. That was the uprising of February 2011. After that, just a case of chaos, people fighting each other over financial resources. The question of those Africans, if pushed back, they're going to be, I'm saying that as one of the possibilities. When somebody who's very poor, who's very desperate, he's deprived of a better way of life, whatever your reasons are of preventing him from coming, I respect your reason, whether security or you are afraid for your demographic structure, your social fabric, whatever, I respect that, okay? But if you push him back, while there is another option, terrorist networks, they offer him the money, they offer him training, he's helpless. He doesn't have to feed his family. And Daesh give him $2,000, $2,500 per month and made something out of him. He became recognized. He put that rifle on his shoulder. He can feed his family. And he was promised some sort of life in the day after. So there is no comparison. Was it his choice? I think he was pushed to that choice. That's why I'm not saying that they're going to come to Europe, but Europe is claiming that it's fighting terrorism. We are fueling terrorism without knowing it by putting the people into the environment that produces terrorism. That's what I mean. They might initiate terrorist activities, not in Europe, anywhere in Asia and North America and South America and the Arab world and Africa, but it's a terrorist activity. Was it his choice? That's exactly what. So it's not a question of a childish issue. A child is part of a family. For that African, he's part of nobody. He became with no family. So he's pushed into the most extreme, not because it's his choice, because it's the only choice in front of him. That's why I'm saying we can create a better way of life through different approaches of dealing with this. He might go to terrorism and he might not. It doesn't mean that this is the deterministic conclusion that if he's not in, then he's a terrorist. No, that's not. But one of the options that he might go that way.
Hi, thank you. I also work in the European Parliament on migration, so I want to just grasp this opportunity for a few questions I've been struggling with. First, there is sometimes from commentators you hear that the European response on migration from Libya is based on history or hysteria, because Libya is a destination country, and even in these circumstances, with the conflict, many of the 720,000 migrants that are now there actually want to stay. They don't want to cross. So I would like to hear your view on that, because I have no idea. In fact, migration from Libya is big. So then the second, recently at a reading or a gathering of the Libya Commission in the European Parliament, the UNHCR mentioned that they only have access to 7 nationalities because of the government, I don't want to say, but because of authorities. And they mentioned a principle of brotherhood. So I think that the underlying idea, but that's also what I want to ask, for you to explain this principle of brotherhood, if you can. The underlying idea is that Arabs are welcome, but that many of the other that UNHCR has access to Africans mainly, or Saharan Africans. And then the third one was about non-government detention centers. I was wondering what their history is. Is it new? Because that's where the biggest part of the migrants are now, in the non-government detention centers. I'm sorry, thank you.
Look, Libya was a first-degree destination company before the last 7 years in Libya. It was the ideal place. I mean, because the Pan-Africanism pursued by Gaddafi, Africa was his favorite. He was appointed king of kings of Africa. As I said, rarely if you find any African capital without 1 or 2 5-star hotels owned by Libya. So Libya was well established. Africans were more than welcome. They work with Libyans, they deal with them as part of the social fabric. So Libya was a destination during Gaddafi years. But Libya today is a transit country. Nobody wants to live in hell, but because of the smuggling and trafficking, gangs and mafia mostly are in Libya. They go to Libya as a transit to jump to Europe. But because some European governments, through different means, one of them is contracting some militia leaders, the moment he arrives at the coast, he's pushed back into the inland. He wastes his money because he pays into different lords of war, and then when he reaches the coast, he's pushed back into the inland. Some of them are in detention camps. Now we have more than 5 detention camps. The numbers are staggering. Some people say 700,000. Some people say, no, they might reach 1 million. And let me be very frank, and I said this in different TV interviews, because of some statements made by some European governments, which was raising the possibility why Libya cannot be considered as an alternative homeland for the Africans. That's a scary scenario. Therefore, having those detention camps in Libya, probably in just a matter of 1 year, we'll start talking from a human rights point of view. Those people should be provided with their hospitals, with their schools, and this is how the Israeli settlements started in 1948. So this is a scary scenario, because I don't understand why such a European official comes out in a public statement and say, why don't we consider Libya as an alternative homeland for the Africans? Libya is a very big country with a huge amount of money, and it's just 6 million people. It can accommodate up to 40, 50 million Africans. I mean, this is a serious thing. That's why I'm saying that don't put the Africans into this very severe tragedy, because they've been subject to torture, to rape, to killing, to all types of inhumane treatment. Why? Because there is no state that can be held responsible for those acts. By the way, some of those gangs are Africans, non-Libyan Africans from African countries, and they are operating as mafia leaders on Libyan soil. To that degree, Libya became no man's land. I mean, it's just, you can do whatever you want.
So I believe that you were asking about the 7 nationalities included by UNHCR protection system, I think. Well, these 7 nationalities are the Eritrean, Darfuris, and South Sudan, and I think Nigerian, Ethiopian, but Amoro Ethiopian, so certain ethnicity from the Republic of Ethiopia. And UNHCR is trying with the Libyan government right now to extend the protection for other nationalities. But the problem that Libya is not a party to Geneva Convention and the protocol of Geneva Protocol for asylum and protection. However, the government is trying to help the UNHCR. And the problem that we have already, through UNHCR, registered around 48,000 refugees in Libya, in a country that is not party to Geneva Convention. And there are more than 100,000 eligible for protection. So they are fitting the criteria of the UNHCR. And here, maybe I will say something that is not related to your question, but it is really dangerous for our country, with such a country with a small population, that the resettlement scheme of the United Nations, the pledges from the international community, is not working well. So only 25 has been resettled in France out of 1,200 evacuated to Niger. And the rest of 48,000 are still in Libya. UNHCR is continuing registering refugees in Libya in time where the international community, European Union member states, did not fulfill their pledges to resettle these refugees out of Libya. We have more than 700,000 of illegal migrants residing on our soil in Libya. They have created, according to the summit of the European Union and African Union in Abidjan last year, evacuation mechanism. They said that we have already evacuated 20,000 of illegal migrants. Most of these 20,000 are stranded in time that is close to the new year, in a country that is mostly influenced by militias. There's so many criminal activities. The illegal migrants will go voluntarily to the UNHCR and IOM to go back to their country to spend the new year there, and then to come back in the time where the Mediterranean Sea is low, and then to take the turn to cross to Europe. Briefly, this approach from the international community on migration in Libya is characterized as a blinkered approach. it will not solve the problem anytime soon. I hope that I answered your question.
Thank you,
Thank you, Muhammad. Always be ready to step in, to...
Let me take the last questions, and please be brief. You had a question in the... Oh, there are 4, okay.
I have one question, a short one. It's about twinning. You mentioned that you have a positive view on the twinning of universities and twinning of hospitals, so cooperation between a partner in Europe and a partner in Libya. I was wondering what your view is on the twinning of municipalities in the short term and long term. Could this be beneficial for Libya?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yes, in the back.
Yeah, very quick, easy question. Which countries are funding militias to stop people leaving the European Union? Which countries from the European Union are funding militias to stop people leaving the country?
Okay. You?
I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on the relationship between the main political parties, especially with the Eastern Libyan government under the leadership of General Haftar.
Okay, and then last question.
Could you elaborate on the role of neighboring countries in the Libyan conflict, for example, Algeria?
Well, a twinning of municipalities in the presence of a state is something that I personally welcome, because it gives specificity to concrete problems that both municipalities in different countries can work together to solve, Plus, it gives the sense of modeling when a municipality in Libya gets into a twinning, for instance, with a municipality in Milano. I mean, there is a way of copying and modeling what's taking place there in terms of the style of management, in terms of technology, the way things are worked out, planning. Twinning in the municipality field is something that's very fruitful from experience, but in the presence and the existence of a state. But if you don't have a state and you go for twinning with municipalities, that will postpone the rebirth of the state, I don't know. We are not in Chatham House rules here to talk about. We're not Chatham House rules, so I'll tell you the name of the country during the break. The relationship between different parties, and you put specific emphasis on General Haftar. General Haftar is the general commander of the army, the Libyan army. Basically, he controls the eastern part of the country, but I would say that we still don't have a very strong national army that can control the whole terrain of Libya, And this is one of the problems. There are some serious negotiations going on in Cairo, probably the third round, which was just came to an end probably last week, talks how to unite the military in all parts of Libya. Hopefully that works out. If that works, that could be a very strong positive step. The other parties, unfortunately, if you followed the Libyan uprising since its start 2011, you would notice that the eastern part of the country, there wasn't much conflict. Just first 4 days, and the whole eastern region was out of control by Gaddafi regime, Most of the fighting took place in the western part of the country. And most of the militia condensity and condensative weapons are in the western part of the country. It's a jungle out there, To give you an idea, when we got into Tripoli, August 20, 2011, there were only 18 militias in Tripoli. Today, who registered themselves as Tuwar militia members, are talking about 320,000. Everybody is paid by the government. And those militias, even the the militias that fight each other, both are financed by the government. So you wouldn't find a precedent for this in history where the government finances its own civil war, you know, finance both militias, because all militias twist the arm of the prime minister to get the money they want. That's why I'm saying, please, we don't need more governments. We need a state. Let us discuss the problems that impede the state. To have that done, you have to bring those parties, political leaders, militia leaders, or let me say armed, including the army, social leaders, and some of the former regime followers. Those four segments represent the balance of power today on the ground. Unfortunately, most of the effort which has been exerted so far by different UN representatives is directed to those who are in the government. They talk to Mr. Sarraj, they talk to HOR Chairman Aguila, they talk to State Council Chairman Swehli. They don't ask themselves, you know, what capability base, what power base those people have on the ground. That's why nothing is implemented. You can have as much khairat as you want, as long as those who represent the balance of power on the ground are not included in the negotiation process. That's why I say revisiting the whole thing, reshuffling the whole thing, and coming up with a different participants for the dialogue, different issues to be discussed, not talking about forming government, talking about how to solve problems that represent an obstacle to bringing the state back to our lives. If we manage to do that, then you can bring whomever you want to preside over the government to implement that program. I think this is the starting point. And unfortunately, we are lost for those 7 years. We did not find that starting point yet. There is another question, I think.
The neighborhood of Egypt, of Libya.
Algeria publicly, its policy is supporting a political dialogue, supporting the roadmap of the UN presented by Mr. Salama. Sometimes we find statements that we are against any interference, foreign interference in Libya. We want Libyans to solve their own problems. But to be honest with you, this statement, we hear it from everybody. But at the end, we find everybody is tampering with Libyan internal politics. You know, I don't want to go into details there, but what I want to say that there is a ping-pong game played in Libya by different Arab players and different European players. And that ping-pong game is nice to watch for foreigners, you know. But let us not forget that the ball which is hit is a Libyan ball, you know.
Thank you very much. Professor, would you like to make a concluding remark? Or you don't have to.
The conclusion is that solving the problem is not necessary for tomorrow. But I think your rather provocative thoughts showing that there is a co-responsibility not only domestically in Libya, but also by either the European Union, but also by European countries, as you said. So, solving the migration, I hope we continue to solve the refugee problem. That's a totally different humanitarian obligation we have. And there we're mostly dealing with people who aspire to go back when war situations or terrorist situations are over. Trying to control the African migration move could indeed be the long-term policy of the European Union towards Africa in a well-monitored way could solve part of it. But again, it's not going to be easy. Africa has a totally different, in my eyes, totally historical culture of governance. And the European Union has to cope with the bilateral historical interests of some of its member states in Africa. And that, I think, makes it more difficult to come up with a common EU strategy for bringing the level of education, the level of capability of creating a more prosperous environment, more difficult than, for example, for the Chinese. That bilateral history of the UK, of Belgium, of France, Portugal, Spain, we all have had bilateral interests in Africa, and we are still not always very enthusiastic about a common solution for the African issues we have to face. Because, you know, if you create a kind of joint effort to border control better, you're pushing the problem for partly out of Libya, but the problem is not solved. Where will the stream go? Because the migration stream of the Africans will subsist and will find other ways to try to get out of this economic disaster these people have to live in. So, okay, we continue to have enormous responsibilities. There are probably no short-term solutions which are ideal and pragmatically ready to be implemented, but we have a duty to continue to find a way out and to solve problems you're facing, and through that we are facing as well. So I was extremely happy to have been able to listen to you, and I think you leave us with a lot of thoughts to try to take up responsibilities in whatever function and role we play within the European environment. So thank you very much again.
Thank you.